Hey guys, welcome back, and this is your boy Marvin Ambrosi is here to bring a great review on something that we've been wanting to talk about for a while. It's here, the untold story, the rise and fall of And1. Are you ready for this one? Let's go.
I couldn't help but notice your pain.
My pain?
It runs deep. Share it with me.
Okay guys, welcome back again, and you know what? When I watched this, I was really excited. First of all, I watched the 30 for 30. If you guys haven't seen that, I'll try and put the link in the description of anywhere online where you can see it, because it's not currently available on Disney Plus, but hopefully it will be available very soon. But going into the Netflix Untold production, they covered just over an hour. I felt like this needed probably, I'd say 7 to 8 part series where every player and everybody had their own episode, because there was so much more to be told. If you were part of that generation or knew anything about the And1 mixtape and that world, especially, I was in New York at the time when that was happening, so it was everywhere you went. It was an epidemic of basketball. It was absolutely crazy. And the owners, the co-founders that went into this, they actually came from playing ball in university. So you've got Seth, Jay and Tom. Now Seth and Jay were actually best friends in college, and they were playing ball all the time, ironically playing street ball, and they happened to know a guy who Seth introduced to Jay, who he said was a bit off the cuff, a bit strange, but happened to be a complete genius. But he was playing ball around 7 hours a day, still managing to maintain a GPA, a 3.0 GPA. If you guys don't know, that's pretty much A's all day, but he was managing to play ball. So they wanted to do a project and have something that spoke to them and spoke to how they played ball, because they knew they weren't going to be good enough to play in the NBA or in a league of that caliber. But what they wanted to do is create a street brand and a clothing that spoke to the audience that they loved, which was street ball. And that's exactly how And1 was born. Now, if anyone hasn't owned an And1 t-shirt or ever had one in the past, trust me, you were missing out. It was a part of ball where it was transcendent to something that changed a lot of people's lives. There's many people that I know that are going to watch this video now that can say they remember where they were when they were watching those tapes and trying to emulate those moves. It's just quite crazy to think that the only way we could emulate those tapes was actually by memorizing what we saw on the video to then go outside and practice. If you were somewhere where I was living, I couldn't practice in my room. My room wasn't big enough. So you had to go outside and practice and remember and keep coming back and forth to see what Skip to Malou was doing, to see what AO was doing, to see what Professor was doing. It was crazy. Like Hot Sauce. Yo, let's just be honest now. I'm going to go into Hot Sauce right now. Name me any athlete that can come out of jail, straight out of jail, and then on top of it, go straight into a league and then play at a high level with the best of them, the best of the street ballers in New York. That is an untold story in itself. This dude came out of jail, straight onto a basketball court, tried out and completely lit up the park. And everybody vouched for him and said, that's the guy that's going to make the team. And crazy enough, did he disappoint? Did he not show up on that day? Did he make any excuses to say, oh man, I've been in jail, I ain't been playing a lot, or like, I don't really feel like it? No. This guy, he was just street ball. He was a hustler. That's exactly what he did. And he went in there and completely killed it. Now, as far as the other guys are concerned, there's many players on these teams and so many guys I want to go into about the squads. Definitely going to talk about the Professor as well, because he's actually one of my all-time favorite people in basketball, and I'll explain to you a little bit later. Now, first of all, just as a documentary, I thought it was actually well done. I thought the documentary spoke to how the owners actually jeopardized the future of the brand. They weren't foreseeing and looking at the future of how the players could be incorporated into the business to protect them, as well as building it as a brand. I think it's not their fault. I look at it now and I think they can look at it and say, we wish we did this differently. But however, from a business standpoint, they didn't have any models to work from to know how to do the business and how to work it as they did. Hence the reason why people like Nike were attracted to copying what they did and stealing their audience, and NBA were watching, because ultimately they created something much bigger than what they realized, And even now watching it, I think we can all agree that And One wasn't really a brand about clothing. And One was a league. And One was a brand new league that was going to allow anyone worldwide to try out for and be able to play as on a stage as big as Madison Square Garden and fill the garden. Now, if you don't understand what it means, let's put this into football terms. Now, imagine if you were at Liverpool FC, you're at Anfield. Now, imagine if an amateur game was being played and the amateur team of the best of the street ball amateur players said, we're going to create a league, and they filled the stadium. Just put that into perspective. Do we need to go professional? No, you don't need to go professional. Through ticket sales, through fans, through clothing, through merchandise, they are going to do pretty well. That is what threatened the very existence of the pathways of going to the NBA and going through the college system. Can you imagine how many college players came through after that wouldn't have went to college if they knew that if they worked on their game hard enough, the And1 mixtape tour would come around to their city, and then what they would do, they would try out, they would play, and ultimately famous in a second, rich in a second, more money than they'd ever seen in their lives. It wouldn't have been that lottery NBA money, but ultimately it would have been the money that would have changed their lives, and they would have been playing the sport that they would have loved. Now, you got to understand, it's like a 1 to 2 in a billion chance to make the NBA. So the fact that you can come from nowhere and then go into that league, it's serious. Now, the United States is a very big place. There's many states to go through, and the fact that they went on a tour and was getting every single city to assemble their best players, it meant that you were going to see the best of the best, and they were all going to show up. And the fact that they created a tournament where you had to knock out another player in order to stay in to become part of the team. Now, that's even better because it was fair game. It was who's drawing audience, who's bringing people in. People could have turned around and said, Professor was going to be that token white guy. No. Professor went to the most hostile territory basketball courts that you'd ever know or see in your life. And everywhere that guy turned up, he showed up. The clips don't lie. He didn't shy away from any competition, didn't back down, he played his game, and he ultimately, to me, was one of the most impressive professionals. Forget players, professionals I'd seen, because he was under a lot more pressure than what people realized, and he just came in there and just was him. He was quiet, he just went on the court and he was loud. And even now, he's used the same business model that they used in And1 to start with, where he was starting online. If you saw his mixtapes where the Spider-Man outfit, the Deadpool outfit, no one knew it was him to start with. So what he did was he created a buzz around this player on court that everyone was going crazy about, which was Faceless. We can relate more with someone faceless because we can't hate on someone we can't see. Really think about that. Sometimes when you see someone's doing really well, what you try not to do is you're like, they're doing good. You ain't going to like it. You're not going to share it. But because he was faceless, everyone was sharing this guy in the Spider-Man outfit and the Deadpool outfit, thinking like, yeah, this guy's killing it. He's unbelievable. And that's exactly what we did. We shared it. And by the time the buzz was so high, people were saying, I'm sure that's Professor. I'm sure that's Professor. He came out and said it was him, but what was he ready for? He was prepared and he had his content ready and his brand ready to move to the next level. And he was one of the first finders of bringing YouTube basketball to another level. Because it's like celebrity YouTube basketball is another thing in itself. These guys are making crazy money. Money, again, this was And1 money they're making, but even more. But And1 had an audience that was worldwide. And this is where they went wrong with the merchandise. They should have. Everyone's jersey should have been sold separately, and they should have had a cut of the money. Every player should have had a cut of their own jersey sales. Every player should have had their own shoe, signature shoe with the business, and had their own shoe sales. Whether that was special edition or not, they all should have had that. Every player should have had a percentage of And1 and stock in the company. The owners know this now. However, at the time, you name me any player, any athlete, anyone in any league that had a deal like that. No, it was non-existent. Remember, Michael Jordan only gets 5%. 5% of Jordan. Just 5%. Just put that in perspective. Exactly. Of one of the biggest brands, and it's him on the brand. He was happy to take that because did he know Jordan was going to be what it is now? Of course not. But this is And1, and this is where they took it next. Now, Tom Austin, one of the co-founders and owners of And One, the one thing that made him quite different was that he was a creative. He was the one that took charge and actually decided to actually take over in regards to the shoe design, and moved over to, I'm not sure if it was Japan or China, I'm not sure where he went, but he moved there and he took full charge of the design and made sure they had quality reassurance, especially after probably the worst thing that could have happened to their brand was that they did the best signing of one of the hypest players to come out of Coney Island, which was Stephon Marbury. And what was the first thing he did in the game? He did his ankle. That is probably the worst advertising you could ever have in any aspect of any kind of sport, to sell a shoe. And every brand took advantage of the fact that they'd done that. They were threatened by the fact that they were actually doing a lot better than them in sales, in every aspect, with as little marketing as what they'd ever had. And what it came down to in the end was that, which I didn't peep, I don't know if you did, I want to make sure you say this in the comments, because I did not realize all these years that Vince Carter, in one of the most iconic dunk contests of all time, was wearing And One shoes. I'm not kidding you. I don't know what, I saw myself as someone that knew everything about basketball and knew a lot. I did not know that. That's something that just completely went over my head. And when I saw that, I went, wow, now I know why Nike were threatened and did this.
I'm going.
That's right. You saw that commercial. I actually had to pay homage to one of my favorite movies, Scary Movie 2. It's not actually a favorite movie, but one of my favorite comedy scenes, because I just thought that scene was hilarious. But when it comes down to it, you've got to understand, they only copied what they didn't have because they didn't have that audience. Nike had their athletes, they had Suburban, we wore Nike, we wore Jordan, but they needed to get to that next level because they didn't have the streets. And they didn't have the inner city streets, the kids that couldn't afford the Jordans. Even though you would go to the inner city areas in Harlem, in the Bronx, I would see all these kids wearing Jordans, wondering how their parents are affording them. But they did. That's just something they did. That's a stateside thing. They did that all the time. And when it comes down to it, these kids are buying affordable And One shoes that their parents can afford, clothing their parents can afford, and on top of it, the clothes, the shoes, the slogans, they were amazing. I remember rocking my And One. Gosh, like at one point, I'd want to wash it every other day if I didn't have enough. I think I had 3 And One t-shirts I bought from New Jersey, and I remember getting them and bringing them back home. No one had one. Like not one person had an And One t-shirt. Everywhere I went, someone asked me, where did you get that t-shirt? Looking back at it now, if I was an adult at the time, the first thing I probably would have done was flown over to America, bought as many of those t-shirts as I could, and sold them in the UK. Because I'm telling you this now, if you're talking about these hype beasts selling stuff now, that would have been the thing to do at the time. And talking about the fall of And One, the fall was the fact that they were such a small company and they didn't have a lot of people working for them. They didn't have a lot of divisions. They didn't have a lot of team members to lean on and business partners to lean on to go, this is what we need to do to get to this other level. It was 3 guys making decisions. And in those decisions they were making, they were up against a lot bigger companies. You got to think, you got the Nikes, you got the Reeboks, even Reebok obviously being bigger at the time, but And One were making more money. And Nike was shook. And they did something. And you saw what they did. And we've just shown that a minute ago. But what we want to really reflect on is that the fall of it was that they didn't act quick enough on the potential of the league aspect of And One. It wasn't about the brand and the shoe. It was about giving people the hope and the dreams of getting out of the hood. And that's what And One was to me. And One showed and created a showcase where you could go be anyone and anyone. If you've got enough game, you could be an And One player. That's what it came down to at the end of the day. And that meant you could get paid to play basketball. What is more threatening than that? to a professional league that holds stance to where we get this many fans. You could never get as many fans as we do because this is our league. Hey, NBA, how are you going to handle it if there's an M1 league created and in every single city in America there's an M1 team, which is a league where they go to each team. There's an actual league where we've got schedules. People are going to their city and they're doing it. Of course they're going to go because every game is going to be electric. You're going to get all those people hyping, jumping, going crazy. That footage, that content's going to go out there. And on top of it as well, we didn't have social media at the time. So if that kept on going, can you imagine how we watch social media clips now when you see people breaking people down and everyone going crazy in the parks? That is N1. That's what N1 was. And that's essentially would have been on a bigger stage, on a bigger platform. Everyone that would have won in that league would have had their own shoe deal exclusively with N1. But on top of that, every player, depending what their nickname was, example, Hot Sauce, what would I have done if I was Hot Sauce's manager? I would have done a special edition shoe with Tabasco. Easy. Tabasco bottle on the side of the shoe. Sounds crazy, right? But you're like, oh, guess what? You would have bought them. You would have bought the shoe. Everyone would have went hype on them. Professor's one would have had a book, or like literally a book, or probably, let's say, like a Bunsen burner or a tube on there, something like that with chemicals on the shoe, on the side of the shoe. And everyone would have bought them because they would have been that player's shoe, their favorite player. And every city would have had a player like that. Skip to My Lou would have had his own shoe. AO would have had his own shoe. And this is what I'm saying. The list goes on. And there was so much opportunities missed. But again, this was at a time when it was all brand new. So I can't blame the owners for it. They can only learn from what happened. But then the players can only look back and reflect on what they created. And they created a lot of other players underneath them that then became the greatest players in the NBA. And one was like going to Rucker Park. It was the equivalent to something that was from the past that created a future. And all the players that became M1 players, the only reference points they had, like we said earlier, was the Rucker Park athletes, the players that came before them. And again, these were all free games. No one was getting paid unless it was under the table hustling. That was the only way people were getting paid. It was all for the love of basketball. And you couldn't get in. People were watching from bridges, from the top of apartment buildings, climbing on top of like walls. They were just going crazy. And it was because they wanted to get a glimpse at Pee Wee Kirkland's. They wanted to see all of these players. They wanted to see the Elder Goat Managos. They wanted to see the Julius Irvins. Like these are the guys that came to the Rucker, and that was what happened when years later you had people like Kobe coming back. You had a lot of playground legends, and people know if you're going into the Rucker, you're serious. You may be able to play in the NBA, but can you play at the Rucker? So it all kind of went backwards. And you look at M1 started that trend where it was like, the guys that play in M1, they're not NBA players, but skill-wise, they could play in the NBA. Discipline, could they? Maybe not. But we couldn't argue the fact that their skill level, their talent, their showmanship, like you got the mix between someone of NBA caliber with a Harlem Globetrotter. So you had the mix and the blend between the two, but with the hype, where the Globetrotters have a bit of showmanship, they have a lot of showmanship with things that are staged. Whereas N1, these guys are really playing defense and getting completely broken down. And then someone's coming right back at them and they're getting them. It's not even a case like you're seeing misses everywhere, like they're just missing shots, they're going back, it's boring. No, these guys were professional on another level. And that was why it was just so entertaining and so enduring to watch. And it really changed my life and a lot of people's, watching how they operated and what street ball is now. I go to a basketball court now and I'm hoping to feel that hype. I'm hoping to feel that energy. And when I play, and when you get an M1, you go M1. Hence how the name was born. That's exactly what it is. It's that shout, it's that swag, it's that anger, it's that passion, and that speaks right through ballers, and we can all relate to that. Now, you want to talk about timing when it comes to things going right for your business? You can only speak to the basketball gods on this one. Jordan retires, there's an NBA lockout, so there's no NBA basketball. Where do you turn to? M1. That's what they did. They created something, they created a hype, they created the playground, they got everyone going to the playground, and people had something else to grab onto, and they completely cornered the market. Nike had nothing to do with that market, nor did any other brand for that matter. So they basically decided to expose what they loved and expose the league. And then when the league came back, what do you think happened? People wanted to play like the M1 players. People were actually doing moves like the M1 guys. People were replicating. You see players now. Chris Paul has done stuff in games that was exactly the same move as what Hot Sauce did. It's absolutely crazy when you look at things back to back and you think, what players wouldn't have been created if we never had M1? Now, Skip to Malou was one of the first players I actually saw before the M1 mixtapes, and I used to get a lot of playground tapes when I'd go to Harlem with my dad in '93, and honestly, I'd never seen anybody do anything like that before. Big massive shout out to Uncle Leroy. If you don't know about Leroy Shaw, he was actually a playground legend in New York, and he did stuff with a basketball that was just mesmerizing. It's pre-video camera days, but yeah, just shout out to him. And Skip to Malou, like, he was literally a wizard with the basketball. You got to think to yourself, a company like M1 putting out over 55,000 free videos for people to watch some of the best and unbelievable basketball they've ever seen in their lives, just all got transformed into that 55,000 easily turned into 1 million. Because there was friends going round to see. So you got to think to yourself, you got 3 to 4 friends coming round to a household to watch one video, and then you got someone else in the hood bootlegging the video. What do you think's gonna happen? It's gonna go viral. And this was the real age of viral. This is viral before viral. Things when they're actually really good. This was something with substance, and this was something that we'd never seen before.